and happy Christmas! And yes, it's literally Christmas. If you cannot tell from the presents behind my tree, aka behind me, that's my tree. And this is the cousin wall. But anyway, it's Christmas! So to celebrate, I think it went fine. I opened up this cracker and my cat threw the front toy out of it. Okay, well, I don't know what was in it, but I'll find out when we're done here. In the meantime, present! I believe Father Christmas got me this, so let's find out and see what's inside. Ooh! Glinda ornament! Thank you, Father Christmas! Now, onto what you came here for. Potter chapter! And yes, these are Potter Christmas PJs, if you can't tell. Chapter 10, Creature's Tale. Harry woke early next morning. Well, yeah, I literally woke up early this morning to read this for you guys, so I hope you enjoy. And will you just stop? I'm talking to my cats, not you guys. Keep listening. Wrapped in a sleeping bag on the drawing room floor. A chink of sky was visible between the heavy curtains. Well, there's a view of our sky right there. It was the cool, clear blue of watered ink. Ooh, that is a pretty color. Somewhere between night and dawn, and everything was quiet except for Ron and Hermione's slow, deep breathing. All I can think of is Darth Vader. Anyway, Harry glanced over at the dark shapes they made on that board beside him. Ron had a fit of gallantry and insisted that Hermione sleep on the cushions from the sofa so that her silhouette was raised above his. Aw, how nice of you, Ron. Her arm curved to the floor, her fingers inches from Ron's. Harry wondered they had fallen asleep holding hands. The idea made him feel strangely lonely. Aw, hugs for Harry. But don't forget your love, too. He looked up at the shadowy ceiling, the cobwebbed chandelier. Less than 24 hours ago, he had been standing in the sunlight at the entrance to the marquee, waiting to show a wedding guest. It seemed a lifetime away. What was going to happen now? He lay on the floor and he thought of the Horcruxes, of the daunting, complex mission Dumbledore had left him. Dumbledore. The grief that had possessed him. Okay, it's still early and it's Christmas. Cut me some slack. The grief that had possessed him since Dumbledore's death felt different now. The accusations he heard from Muriel at the wedding seemed to have nested in his brain like diseased things, infecting his memories of the wizard he had idolized. Ooh, that's a good word choice there, JK. Could Dumbledore have let such things happen? Had he been like Dudley, content to watch the neglect as long as it did not affect him? Oh, Harry. Oppression occurs in many ways and impacts so many people differently. Try to give your cousin a little bit of leniency here. Could he have turned his back on his sister who was being imprisoned and hidden? Harry thought of Godric's Hollow, of graves Dumbledore had never mentioned there. He thought of mysterious objects left without explanation in Dumbledore's will, and resentment swelled in darkness. Why hadn't Dumbledore told him? Why hadn't he explained? Had Dumbledore actually cared about Harry at all? Oh, Harry, of course he did. That's why he gave his life for you. And, ironically enough, it's a nice parallel to how Christ gave his life for our sins. So, I'm sorry if I'm going a little biblical here, but it's Christmas. So, it's just a nice parallel to realize on Christmas Day. But anyway, where was I? Oh, yes. Or Harry had been nothing more than a tool to be polished and honed, but not trusted, never confided in. Harry couldn't stand lying there with nothing but bitter thoughts for company. Desperate for something to do, for distraction, he slipped out of his sleeping bag, picked up his wand, and crept out of the room. On the landing, he whispered, "Lumos," and started to climb the stairs by wand light. On the second landing was the bedroom in which he and Ron had slept last time they had been here. He glanced into it. The wardrobe door stood open and the bedclothes had been ripped back. Harry remembered the overturned troll leg downstairs. Somebody had searched the house since the Order had left. Snape? Or perhaps Mundungus, who had pilfered plenty from this house both before and after Sirius died? Harry's gaze wandered to the portrait that sometimes contained Phineas Nigellus Black, Sirius's great-great-grandfather. But it was empty, showing nothing but a stretch of muddy backdrop. Phineas Nigellus was evidently spending the night in the headmaster's study at Hogwarts. Harry continued up the stairs until he reached the topmost landing, where there were only 2 doors. One facing him bore a nameplate reading, Sirius. Harry had never entered his godfather's bedroom before. He pushed open the door, holding his wand high to cast light as widely as possible. The room was spacious and must have once been handsome. There was a large bed with the carved wooden headboard, a tall window obscured by long velvet curtains, and a chandelier thickly coated in dusk with candle stubs still resting in its sockets, solid glass hanging in frost-like drips. Ooh, that's a nice set of imagery for Christmas. A fine film of dust covered the pictures on the walls and the bed's headboard. A spider's web stretched between the chandelier and the top of the large wooden wardrobe, and as Harry moved deeper in the room, he heard scurrying of disturbed mice. The teenage Sirius that had plastered the walls with so many posters and pictures that little of the wall's silvery gray silk was visible. Harry could only assume that Sirius's parents had been unable to remove the permanent sticking charm that kept them on the wall, because he was sure that they would not have appreciated their eldest son's taste in decoration. Sirius seemed to have gone out of his way to annoy his parents. There were several large Gryffindor banners, faded scarlet and gold, just to underline the difference from all the rest of the Slytherin family. There were also many pictures of Muggle motorcycles, and also Harry had to admire Sirius's nerve. Several posters of bikini-clad Muggle girls. What a fun image on Christmas. Harry could tell that they were Muggles because they remained quite stationary within their pictures, faded smiles and glazed eyes frozen on the paper. This was in contrast to the only wizarding photograph on the walls, which was a picture of 4 Hogwarts students standing arm in arm, laughing at the camera. With a leap of pleasure, Harry recognized his father. Untidy black hair stuck up at the back like Harry's, and he too wore glasses. Well, I don't know about black hair, but my hair is brunette and wavy, and I wear glasses, so. Beside him was Sirius, carelessly handsome, his slightly arrogant face so much younger and happier than Harry had ever seen it alive. To Sirius's right stood Pettigrew, more than a head shorter, plump and watery-eyed, flushed with pleasure at his inclusion into this coolest of gangs, with the much-admired rebels that James and Sirius had been. On James's left was Lupin, even then a little shabby-looking, but he had the same air of delighted surprise at finding himself liked and included. Or was it simply because Harry knew how it had been that he saw these things in the picture? He tried to take it from the wall. It was his now, after all. Sirius had left him everything, but it would not budge. Sirius had taken no chances in preventing his parents from redecorating his room. I mean, I wouldn't put it by him, honestly. Harry looked around at the floor. Well, my floor is practically presents. If you can't tell. Okay. The sky outside was growing brighter. Well, compared from earlier, it is actually growing brighter. A shaft of light revealed bits of paper. Well, closest paper I have on hand is my wrapping paper. Books. Well, this is a book, so. And small objects. Do these count? I I don't know. I, oh, scattered over the carpet. Evidently, Sirius's bedroom had been searched too, although its contents seemed to have been judged mostly, if not entirely, worthless. A few of the books had been taken roughly enough to part company with their covers, and sauntered pages littered the floor. Harry bent down, picked up a few pieces of paper, and examined them. He recognized one as part of an old edition of the History of Magic book by Bathilda Bagshot, and another as belonging to a motorcycle maintenance manual. The third was handwritten and crumpled. He smoothed it out. Dear Padfoot, thank you. Thank you for Harry's birthday present. It was his favorite by far. 1-year-old and already zooming along on a toy broomstick. He looked so pleased with himself. I'm enclosing the picture so you can see. You know, it only rises about 2 feet off the ground, but he nearly killed the cat. Oh, Harry, I'm sure you didn't mean to. And he smashed a horrible vase Petunia sent me for Christmas. No complaints there. Oh, James. Yes, play with the paper, I don't care. I'm talking to my cat. Of course. Oh, I'm doing the wrong voice. Well, you'll find out the true identity then. I'm going to reread that then. Dear Padfoot, thank you for Harry's birthday present. It was his favorite by far. 1-year-old and already swimming along on the toy broomstick. Looked so pleased with himself. I'm enclosing a picture so you can see. You know, it only rises about 2 feet off the ground, but it nearly killed the cat. Again, I'm sure you didn't mean to, Harry. And he smashed a horrible vase Petunia sent me for Christmas. No complaints there. Of course, James thought it was so funny. Says he's going to be a great Quidditch player. Aw, James, how true you were. If only you were alive to see it. But we've had to pack away all the ornaments and make sure we don't take our eyes off him when he gets going. We've had a very quiet birthday tea, just us and old Bathilda, who's always been so sweet to us and who dotes on Harry. We're so sorry you couldn't come, but the order's got to come first, and Harry's not old enough to know it's his birthday anyway. James is getting a bit frustrated. Shut up here. He tries not to show it, but I can tell. Also, Dumbledore still got his invisibility cloak, so no chance of little excursions. If you could visit, it would cheer him up so much. Wormy was here last weekend. I thought he seemed down, but that was probably about the news about the McKinnons. I cried all evening when I heard. Bathilda drops in most days. She's a fascinating old thing with the most amazing stories about Dumbledore. I'm not sure he'd be pleased if he knew. I don't know how much to believe, actually, because it seems incredible that Dumbledore... Harry's extremities seemed to have gone numb. He stood quite still, holding the miraculous paper in his nervous fingers, while inside him a quiet kind of eruption sent joy and grief thundering in equal measure through his veins. Urging to the bed, he sat down. He read the letter again, but could not take in any more meaning than he had done the first time, and was reduced to staring at the handwriting itself. She had made her G's the same way he did. He searched through the letter for every one of them, and each felt like a friendly little wave glimpsed from behind a veil. Aww, hugs for Harry. The letter was an incredible treasure, proof that Lily Potter had lived, really lived, that her warm hand had once moved across this parchment, tracing ink into these letters, these words about him, Harry, her son, impatiently brushing away the wetness in his eyes. Oh, Harry, you're allowed to cry. I'm emotional just bringing this to life. He reread the letter, this time concentrating on the meaning. It was like listening to a half-remembered voice. They had a cat. Perhaps it perished, like his parents at Godric's Hollow, or else fled when there was nobody left to feed it. Okay, I'm sharing a bit of a theory that Potterheads have. We like to think that Cat ended up being Crookshanks. I mean, we don't know if it's true or not, but it is a really good, compelling theory, and honestly, I see it being canon. So, just think on that a little bit, okay? Anyway, Sirius bought him his first broomstick. His parents had known Bethel to Backshot. Had Dumbledore introduced him? Dumbledore still got his invisibility cloak. There was something funny there. Harry paused, pondering his mother's words. Why had Dumbledore taken James's invisibility cloak? Harry distinctly remembered his headmaster telling him years before, I don't need a cloak to become invisible. Perhaps some less gifted Order member had needed its assistance, and Dumbledore had acted as carrier. Harry passed on. R.A.B was here. Pettigrew, the traitor, had seen down, had he? Was he aware that he was seeing James and William alive for the last time? I mean, that's a very good question to point out. And honestly, I wouldn't put it by him. And finally, Bethel again, who told incredible stories about Dumbledore. It seems that Dumbledore won. But there were any number of things that would seem incredible about Dumbledore. That he once had received bottom marks in the Transfiguration test, for instance, or that he had taken a goat charming like Aberforth. Harry got to his feet and scanned the floor. Again, mine is still littered with presents. Perhaps the rest of the letter was here somewhere. He seized papers, treating them, in his eagerness, with as little consideration as the original served her. He pulled open drawers, shook out books, stood on a chair to run his hand over the top of the wardrobe, and crawled under the bed and armchair. That must be a big bed and armchair if you're going to crawl under it. At last, lying face down on the floor, he spotted what looked like a torn piece of paper under the chest drawers. When he pulled it out, it proved to be the most of the photograph Lily had described in her letter. A black-haired baby was zooming in and out of the picture on a tiny broom, roaring with laughter, and a pair of legs that must have belonged to James was chasing after him. Harry took the photograph into his pocket with Lily's letter, and continued to look for the second sheet. After another quarter of an hour, however, he was forced to conclude that the rest of his mother's letter had gone. Had it simply been lost in the 16 years that had elapsed since it had been written, or had it been taken by whoever searched the room? Well, I honestly know the answer to this, but I'm not going to share it because that'd be spoilers. Sorry. Harry read the first sheet again, this time looking for clues as to what might have made the second sheet valuable. His toy broomstick could hardly be considered interesting to the Death Eaters. The only potentially useful thing he could see here was the possible information on Dumbledore. It seems incredible that Dumbledore... What? Harry! 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 I'm here! He called. What's happened? There was a clatter of footsteps outside the door, and Hermione burst inside. I woke up and didn't know where you were, she said breathlessly. She turned and shouted over her shoulder, Ron! I found him! Ron's annoyed voice echoed distantly from several floors below. I get you, Ron. I'm not much of a morning person either. Good! Tell him from me he's a cat! Harry, just don't disappear, please. We were terrified. Why did you come up here anyway? She gazed around the ransacked room. What have you been doing? Look what I've just found. He held out his mother's letter. Hermione took it and read it while Harry watched her. When she reached down to the page, she looked up at him. Oh, Harry. Hugs for Harry. And there's this too. He handed her the torn photograph. and Hermione smiled at the toddler zooming in and out of sight on the toy room. I've been looking for the rest of the letter, Harry said, but it's not here. Hermione glanced around. Did you make all this mess, or was some of it done when you got here? Someone had searched before me, said Harry. I thought so. Every room I looked into on the way up had been disturbed. What were they after, do you think? Information on the order if it was Snape. But you think he'd already have all he needed? I mean, he was in the order, wasn't he? Well then, said Harry, keen to discuss his theory. What about information on Dumbledore? The second page of this letter, for instance. You know this Bathilda my mum mentions. You know who she is? Who? Bathilda Bagshot, the author of History of Magic, said Hermione, looking interested. So your parents knew her? She was an incredible magical historian. And she's still alive, said Harry. And she lives in Godric's Hollow. Ron's Auntie Marielle was talking about her at the wedding. She knew Dumbledore's family, too. Be pretty interesting to talk to, wouldn't she? There was a little too much understanding in the smile Hermione gave him for Harry's liking. He took back the letter and the photograph and tucked them inside the pouch around his neck, so as to not have to look at her and give himself away. I understand why you'd love to talk to her about your mum and dad. Dumbledore, too, said Hermione. But that wouldn't really help us in our search for the Horcruxes, would it? Harry didn't answer, and she rushed on. Harry, I know you really want to go to Godric's Hollow, but I'm scared. I'm scared at how easily those Death Eaters found us yesterday. This makes me feel more than ever that we ought to be avoiding the place where your parents are buried. I'm sure they'd be expecting you to visit it. It's not just that, Harry said, still avoiding looking at her. Marielle said stuff about Dumbledore at the wedding. I want to know the truth. He told Hermione everything Marielle had told him. When he finished, Hermione said, Of course, I can see why that's upset you, Harry. I love your demonstration of empathy here, Hermione. Or some semblance of it. It really shows your character growing. I'm not upset, he lied. I'd just like to know whether or not it's true. Harry, do you really think you'll get the truth from a malicious old woman like Marielle? Or from Rita Skeeter? How can you believe them? You knew Dumbledore! I thought I did, he muttered. But you know how much truth there was in everything Rita wrote about you. George is right. How can you let these people tarnish your memories of Dumbledore? Harry looked away, trying not to betray the resentment he felt. There it was again. Choose what to believe. He wanted the truth. Why was everybody so determined that he shouldn't get it? Oh, Harry, if I could help you, I would. Meantime, take these hugs. Shall we go down to the kitchen? Hermione suggested after a little pause. Find something for breakfast. Breakfast sounds good about now. He agreed, but grudgingly, and followed her out onto the landing past the second floor that led off it. There were deep scratch marks in the paintwork below, a small sign that he had not noticed in the dark. He paused at the top of the stairs to read it. It was a pompous little sign, neatly lettered by hand, the sort of thing that Percy Weasley might have stuck on his bedroom door. Do not enter without the express permission of Regulus Arcturus Black. And in case you're wondering what that looks like, up there for you. Excitement trickled through Harry, but he was not immediately sure why. He read the sign again. Okay, do not enter without the express permission of Regulus Arcturus Black. Hermione was already a flight of stairs below him. Hermione, he said, and he was surprised that his voice was so calm. Come back up here. What's the matter? R.A.B. I think I found him. There was a gasp, and then Hermione ran back up the stairs. Your mom's letter? But I didn't see. Harry shook his head, pointing at Regulus's sign. She read it, then clutched Harry's arm so tightly that he winced. Sirius's brother, she whispered. He was a Death Eater, said Harry. Sirius told me about him. He joined up when he was really young, and then got cold feet and tried to leave. So they killed him. That fits! Gasped Hermione. If he was a Death Eater, he had access to Voldemort, and if he became disenchanted, then he would have wanted to bring Voldemort down. She released Harry, leaned over the banister, and screamed. No, I'm not going to scream, but I am going to enunciate my voice a little. Run! Run! Get up here, quick! Ron appeared, panting, a minute later, his rod readying his hand. What's up? It's massive spiders again. I want breakfast before I... Oh, Ron. We love you. He frowned at the sign on Regulus's door, to which Hermione was silently pointing. What? That was Sirius's brother, wasn't it? Regulus or Sirius... Regulus... R.A.B! The Locket! You don't reckon... Let's find out, said Harry. He pushed open the door. It was locked. Hermione pointed her wand at the handle and said, Alohomora! There was a click, and the door swung open. They moved over the threshold together, gazing around. Regulus's bedroom was slightly smaller than Sirius's, though it had the same sense of former grandeur. Whereas Sirius had sought to advertise his difference from the rest of the family, Regulus had striven to emphasize the opposite. The slithering colors of emerald and silver were everywhere, draping the bed, walls, and windows. The black family crest was painstakingly painted over the bed, along with its motto, Toujours pur, which is French for always pure, just so you know. Beneath this was a collection of yellow newspaper cuttings, all stuck together to make a ragged collage. Hermione crossed the room to examine them. How about Voldemort? She said. Regulus seems to have been a fan for a few years before he joined the Death Eaters. A little puff of dust rose from the bed covers as she sat down to read the clippings. Harry, meanwhile, had noticed another photograph. A Hogwarts Quidditch team was smiling and waving out of the frame. He moved closer and saw the snakes emblazoned on their chests. Slytherins. Regulus was instantly recognizable as the boy sitting in the middle of the front row. He had the same dark hair and slightly haughty look of his brother, though he was smaller, slighter, and rather less handsome than Sirius had been. He played Seeker, said Harry. What? Said Hermione vaguely. She was still immersed in Voldemort's press clippings. He was sitting in the middle of the front row. That's where the Seeker... Never mind, said Harry, realizing that nobody was listening. Aw, I'd listen, Harry. Ron was on his hands and knees, searching under the wardrobe. Harry looked around the room for likely hiding places and approached the desk. Yet again, somebody had searched before them. The drawer's contents had been turned over recently. The dust disturbed, but there was nothing of value there. Old quills, out-of-date textbooks that bore evidence of being roughly handled, a recently smashed ink bottle, its sticky residue covering the contents of the drawer. There's an easier way, said Hermione as Harry wiped his inky fingers on his jeans. No jeans for me, please. She raised her wand and said, Accio Locket! Nothing happened. Ron, who had been searching the folds of the faded curtains, looked disappointed. Is that it then? It's not here. Oh, it could still be here, but under counter enchantments. said Hermione. Charms to prevent it being summoned magically, you know? Like Voldemort put on the stone base in the cave, said Harry, remembering how he had been unable to summon the fake locket. How are we supposed to find it then? Asked Ron. We search manually, said Hermione. That's a good idea, said Ron, rolling his eyes, and he resumed his examination of the curtains. They combed every inch of the room for more than an hour, but were forced finally to conclude that the locket wasn't there. The sun had risen now. See, our weather's getting brighter. Its light dazzled them even through the grimy landing windows. Could be somewhere else in the house, though, said Hermione in a rallying tone as they walked back downstairs. As Harry and Ron had become more discouraged, she seemed to have become more determined. Whether he had managed to destroy it or not, he wanted to keep it from hidden from Voldemort, wouldn't he? Remember all those awful things we had to get rid of when we were here last time? That cloak shop bolts at everyone, and those old robes that tried to strangle Ron. Ricketts might have put them there to protect the locket's hiding place, even though we didn't realize that. Harry and Ron looked at her. She was standing with one foot in midair, with a dumbstruck look of one who had just been obliviated. Her eyes had even drifted out of focus. At the time, she finished in a whisper. Something wrong? Asked Ron. What's a locket? What? Said Harry and Ron together. In the cabinet in the drawing room. Nobody could open it. We. Harry felt as though a brick had slid down through his chest into his stomach. He remembered. He even handled the thing as they passed it around, each trying in turn to prise it open. It had been tossed into a sack of rubbish, along with the snuff box of wort cat powder and the music box that made everyone sleepy. The creature nicked loads of things back from us, said Harry. It was the only chance, the only slender hope left to them, and he was going to cling to it until forced to let go. He had a whole stash of stuff in his cupboard in the kitchen. Come on. He ran down the stairs, taking 2 steps at a time. The other 2 thundering along in his wake. They had made so much noise that they woke the portrait of Sirius's mother as they passed through the hall. Pills! Mudblood! Scum! She screamed after them as they dashed down into the basement kitchen and slammed the door behind them. Harry ran the length of the room, skidded to a halt at the door of the creature's cupboard, and wrenched it open. There was the nest of dirty old blankets in which the house elf had once slept, but they were no longer glittering with the trinkets the creature had salvaged. The only thing there was an old copy of Nature's Nobility, a wizarding genealogy. Refusing to believe his eyes, Harry snatched up the blankets and shook them. A dead mouse fell out and rolled dismally across the floor. Ron groaned and threw himself into kitchen terror. Hermione closed her eyes. It's not over yet, said Harry, and he raised his voice and called, Creature! There was a loud crack, and the house elf that Harry had so reluctantly inherited from Sirius appeared out of nowhere in front of the cold and empty fireplace. Tiny, half human-sized, his pale skin hanging off him in folds, white hair sprouting copiously from his bat-like ears. He was still wearing the filthy rag in which they had first met him, and the contemptuous look he bent upon Harry showed his attitude to his change of ownership had altered no more than his outfit. Master, croaked the creature in his full frog's voice, and he bowed low, muttering to his knees, After my mistress's old house, with the blood trade of Weasley and my blood, I forbid you to call anyone blood trade. I forbid you to call anyone blood traitor or mudblood, growled Harry. He would have found Creature, with his snout-like nose and bloodshot eyes, a distinctly unlovable object, even if the elf had not betrayed Sirius to Voldemort. I've got a question for you, said Harry, his heart beating rather fast as he looked down at the elf. And I order you to answer it truthfully. Understand? Yes, master, said Creature, bowing low again. Harry saw his lips moving soundlessly, undoubtedly framing the insults he was now forbidden to utter. 2 years ago, said Harry, his heart now hammering against his ribs, there was a big gold locket in the drawing room upstairs. We threw it out. Did you steal it back? There was a moment's silence, during which Creature strained up to look Harry full in the face. Then he said, Yes. Where is it now? Asked Harry jubilantly as Ron and Hermione looked gleeful. Creature closed his eyes as though he could not bear to see their reactions to his next word. Gone. Gone? Echoed Harry, elation budding out of him. What do you mean it's gone? The elf shivered. He swayed. Creature, said Harry fiercely, I order you. Madungus Fletcher, croaked the elf, his eyes still tight shut. Madungus Fletcher stole all Miss Bella and Miss Sissy's pictures, my mistress's gloves, the Order of Merlin First Class, the goblets with the family crest, and Creature was gulping for air. His hollow chest was rising and falling rapidly. Then his eyes flew open and he uttered a blood-curdling scream. I will not attempt that for the sake of my family. And the locket! Master Regulus's locket! Creature did nothing wrong. Creature failed in his orders. Harry reacted instinctively. As Creature lunged for the poker standing in the grate, he launched himself upon the elf, flattening him. Hermione's scream mingled with Creature's, which I will not attempt. But Harry bellowed louder than both of them. Creature, I order you to stay still! He felt the elf freeze and released him. Creature lay flat on the stone floor, tears gushing from his sagging eyes. Harry, let him up! Hermione whispered. So he can beat himself up with the poker, snorted Harry, kneeling beside the elf. I don't think so. Right, Creature, I want the truth. How do you know Madungus Fletcher stole the locket? Creature saw him, gasped the elf as tears poured over his snout and into his mouth full of graying teeth. Creature saw him coming out of Creature's cupboard with his hands full of Creature's treasures. Creature told the thief to stop, but Madungus Fletcher laughed and ran. He called the locket Master Regulus's, said Harry. Why? Where did it come from? What did Regulus have to do with it? Creature, sit up and tell me everything you know about that locket, and everything Regulus had to do with it. Please, Harry, you could be a little more polite. The elf sat up, curled into a ball, and placed his wet face between his knees and began to rock backward and forward. When he spoke, his voice was muffled but quite distinct in the silent, echoing kitchen. Master Sirius ran away. Good riddance, for he was a bad boy and broke my mistress's heart with his lawless ways. But Master Regulus had proper pride. He knew it was due to the name of Black and the dignity of his pure blood. For years he talked of the Dark Lord. He was going to bring the wizards out of hiding to rule the muggles and muggleborns. And when he was 16 years old, Master Regulus joined the Dark Lord. So proud, so happy to serve. And one day, a year after he had joined, Master Regulus came down to the kitchen to see Creature. Master Regulus always liked Creature. And Master Regulus said, the old elf rocked faster than ever. Said that the Dark Lord required an elf. Voldemort needed an elf, repeated, looking around at Ron and Hermione, who looked just as puzzled as he did. "Oh, yes," moaned Creature. "And Master Regulus had volunteered Creature. It was an honor," said Master Regulus. "An honor for him, and for Creature, who must be sure to do whatever the Dark Lord ordered him to do. And then come home." Cameo from Lily. Hi, baby. Creature rocked still faster, his breath coming in sobs. So Creature went to the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord did not tell Creature what they were to do, but took Creature with him to a cave beside the sea. And beyond the cave there was a cavern, and in the cavern there was a great black lake. The hairs on the back of Harry's neck stood up. Creature's croaking voice seemed to come to him from across that dark water. He saw what had happened as clearly as though he had been present. There was a boat. Of course there had been a boat. Harry knew the boat. Ghostly green and tiny, bewitched so as to carry one wizard and one victim toward the island in the center. This, then, was how Voldemort had tested the defenses surrounding the Horcrux, by borrowing a disposable creature, a house elf. There was a basin full of potion on the island. The Dark Lord made Creature drink it. The elf quaked from head to foot. Creature drank, and as he drank he saw terrible things. Creature's inside burned. Creature cried for Master Regulus to save him. He cried for some stuff, but the Dark Lord only laughed. He made Creature drink all the potion. He dropped the locket into the empty basin. He filled it with more potion. And the Dark Lord sailed away, leaving Creature on the island. Harry could see it happening. He watched Voldemort's white, snake-like face vanishing into darkness, those red eyes fixed pitilessly on the thrashing elf whose death would occur within minutes, whenever he succumbed to the desperate thirst that burning potion caused its victim. But here, Harry's imagination could go no further, for he couldn't see how Creature had escaped. Creature needed water, so he crawled to the island's edge and drank from the black lake. And hands, dead hands, came out of the water and dragged Creature under the surface. "How did you get away?" Harry asked, and he was not surprised to hear himself whispering. Creature raised his ugly head and looked at Harry with his great bloodshot eyes. "Master Regulus told Creature to come back," he said. "I know, but how did you escape the infirmary?" Creature didn't seem to understand. "Master Regulus told Creature to come back," he repeated. "I know, but..." "Well, it's obvious, isn't it, Harry?" said Ron. "He separated." "But you couldn't operate in and out of that cave," said Harry. "Otherwise, Dumbledore..." "Elf magic isn't like wizard's magic, is it?" said Ron. "I mean, they can operate and separate in and out of Hogwarts when we can't." There was silence as Harry digested this. How could Dumbledore have made such a mistake? But even as he thought this, Hermione spoke and her voice was icy. "Of course Voldemort would have considered the ways of house elves far beneath his notice, just like all the purebloods who treat them like animals. What never occurred to him that they might have magic that he didn't?" "The house elf's highest law is his master's bidding," intoned Creature. "Creature was told to come home, so Creature came home." "Well, then you did what you were told, didn't you?" said Hermione kindly. "You didn't disobey orders at all." Creature shook his head, rocking as fast as ever. "So what happened when you got back?" Harry asked. "What did Regulus say when you told him what had happened?" "Master Regulus is very worried," croaked Creature. "Master Regulus told Creature to stay hidden, and not to leave the house. And then, it was a little while later, Master Regulus came to find Creature in his cupboard one night, and Master Regulus was strange, as he usually was, disturbed in his mind, and Creature could tell, and he asked Creature to take him to the cave where Creature had gone with the Dark Lord. And so they set off. Harry could visualize them quite clearly. The frightened old elf and the thin, dark seeker who had so resembled Sirius. Creature knew how to open the concealed entrance to the underground cavern. Knew how to raise the tiny boat. This time it was his beloved Regulus who had sailed with him to the island with its basin of poison. And he made you drink the potion, said Harry, disgusted. But Creature shook his head and wept. Hermione's hands leapt to her mouth. She seemed to have understood something. Master Regulus took from his pocket a locket like the one the Lord had, said Creature, tears pouring down either side of his snout-like nose. And he told Creature to take it. And when the basin was empty, to switch the lockets. Creature's sobs came in great raps now. Harry had to concentrate hard to understand him. And he ordered Creature to leave without him. And he told Creature to go home and never to tell my mistress of what he had done, but to destroy first Locket. And he drank all the potion, and Creature swapped the lockets and watched as Master Regulus was dragged beneath the water, and oh, Creature! Well, Hermione, who was crying, she dropped her knees beside the elf and tried to hug him. At once he was on his feet, craning Jane away from her, but obviously repulsed. Well, hugs for Hermione and Creature, because they both need it. The mud touched Creature. You will not allow it. What would his mistress say? I told you not to call her mud blood, snarled Harry, but the elf was already punishing some. He fell to the ground and banged his forehead on the floor. Stop him! Stop him! Hermione cried. Why don't you see now how sick it is? The way they've got to obey! Creature! Stop! Stop! Shouted Harry. The elf lay on the floor, panting and shivering, green mucus glistening around his snout, a bruise already blooming on his pallid forehead where he had struck himself, his eyes swollen and bloodshot, swimming in tears. Harry had never seen anything so pitiful. Oh. So you brought the locket home, he said relentlessly, for he was determined to know the full story, and you tried to destroy it. Nothing Creature did make any mark upon it, moaned the elf. Creature tried everything he knew, but nothing would work. So many powerful spells upon the casing. Creature was sure the way to destroy it was to get inside it, but it wouldn't open. Creature punished himself. He tried again. He punished himself. He tried again. Creature failed to obey orders. Creature could not destroy the locket, and his mistress was mad, grieved, because Master Regulus had disappeared, and Creature could not tell her what had happened. No, because Master Regulus had forbidden him to tell any of the family what happened in the cave. Creature began to sob so hard that there were no more coherent words. Tears flowed down Hermione's cheeks as she watched Creature, but she didn't dare touch him again. Even Ron, who was no fan of Creatures, looked troubled. Harry sat back on his heels and shook his head, trying to clear it. I don't understand you, Creature, he said finally. Voldemort tried to kill you. Regulus tried to bring Voldemort down, but you were still happy to betray Sirius to Voldemort. You were happy to go to Narcissa and Bellatrix, pass on information to Voldemort through them. Harry, Creature doesn't think like that, said Hermione, wiping her eyes on the back of her head. He's a saint. How seldom used to bad, even brutal treatment. What Voldemort did to Creature wasn't that far out of the common way. What if wizards weren't But a wizard won't mean to an elf-like creature. His loyal to people who are kind to him, and Mrs. Black must have been, and certain Regulus certainly was. So he served them willingly and parroted their beliefs. I know what you're going to say, she went on as Harry began to protest, that Regulus changed his mind. But he still doesn't seem to have explained that to Creature, doesn't he? And I think I know why. Creature and Regulus's family were safer if they kept to the old pure blood. Regulus was trying to protect them all. Sirius was horrible to Creature, Harry. And it's no good looking like that. You know it's true. Creature had been alone for a long time when Sirius came to live here. And he was probably starving for a bit of affection. I'm sure Miss Sissy and Miss Bella were perfectly lovely to Creature when he turned up. So he did them a favor and told them everything they wanted to know. I've said all along that wizards pay for how they treat households. But Voldemort did, and so did Sirius. Harry had no retort. As he watched Creature sobbing on the floor, he remembered what Dumbledore had said to him, mere hours after Sirius's death. I do not think Sirius ever saw Creature as a being with feelings as acute as a human. Creature, said Harry after a while, when you feel up to it, please sit up. It was several minutes before Creature hiccuped himself into silence. Then he pushed himself into a sitting position again, rubbing his knuckles into his eyes like a small child. Creature, I'm going to ask you to do something, said Harry. He glanced at Hermione for assistance. He wanted to give the order kindly, but at the same time he couldn't pretend that it wasn't an order. However, the change in his tone seemed to have gained her approval. She smiled encouragingly. Creature, I want you, please, to go and find Maduncus Fletcher. You need to find out where the locket, where Master Regulus's locket is. It's really important. We want to finish the work that Master Regulus started. We want to ensure that he didn't die in vain. The Creature dropped his fist and looked up at Harry. Find Maduncus Fletcher, he croaked, and bring him here to Grimmauld Place, said Harry. Do you think you could do that for us? As Creature nodded and got to his feet, Harry had a sudden inspiration. He pulled out Hagrid's purse and took out the fake Horcrux, the substitute locket in which Regulus had placed the note to Voldemort. Creature, I'd like you to have this, he said, pressing the locket into the elf's hand. This belonged to Regulus, and I'm sure he'd want you to have it as a token of gratitude for what you... Overkill, mate, said Ron as the elf took one look at the locket, let out a howl of shock and misery, and threw himself back onto the ground. It took them nearly half an hour to calm down Creature, who was so overcome to be presented with a black family heirloom for his very own that he was too weak at the knees to stand properly. When he finally was able to totter a few steps, they all accompanied him to his cupboard, watched him tuck up the locket safely in his dirty blankets, and assured him that they would make its protection their first priority while he was away. He then made 2 low bows to Harry and Ron, and even gave a funny little spasm in Hermione's direction. That might have been an attempt at a respectful salute, before disapparating with the usual loud crack. And that is the end of this chapter. Once again, from my family to yours, if you celebrate, Happy Christmas. Bye!